I study mathematics, and what really got me into Go, rather than the other way around, was an area of math called combinatorial games. This area of math talks about how we can use games to create numerical systems and the rules that govern that system. And Go was one of the large motivations for that area of mathematics. Go itself, however, might not be too related to my area of expertise or my area of interest, but there are certain principles I think underlie learning anything, and Go is such a good way to understand those principles, to look at simple rules and then see where your intuition takes you. And after a while, you have to start actually being able to look deeper and how you practice and the different methods. I think for me, it was the other way around, where I took my general life skills and applied it to Go. But I can for sure see that people also take Go and learn these specific skills and take them to any other part of their life. I met one guy who had studied Go for 12 hours a day for a period of time, and he took that to then later study computer engineering. Yes, that pure focus that was given to. I think that's worth a lot.
Next up, we're going to actually talk with somebody that I've wanted to talk with since the beginning of starting this podcast. He was nice enough to take some time out of his busy schedule and have a conversation with me, particularly around his life's work. First off, I do want to apologize. The audio quality is a little bit challenged from my part of the interview. The good news is you're hearing me not so much, and you're mostly hearing the conversation with our guest. So without further ado, we are going to go into my interview with Anders Kierulf, the creator of SmartGo. Anders Kierulf, thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so maybe I thought we could just start by giving a little bit of your background. So after developing the award-winning SmartGo board, you were a development lead working on PowerPoint at Microsoft's graphics business unit in Silicon Valley, and you have more than 20 years of experience in computer Go, and you've been working on SmartGo full-time since 1999. Some fun facts about you. You are a multiple-time Swiss Othello champion, and you're a U.S. Othello champion, and you're currently in the process of building a passive house in Kanab, Utah, for which I will include your blog with the details. And then the last thing I noticed here was that you are a joggler. What is that exactly?
So a joggler is somebody who's juggling while running. And it's not as hard as it sounds. Basically, if you can juggle while running because it's the exact same arm movement. And the International Juggling Association has juggling races at their event every year, and I participate in a number of those. But lately I've been getting most of my exercise through Ultimate Frisbee.
Maybe we can just start by going back to the beginning, thinking about when you were introduced to Go in the early 80s by a professor during your undergraduate studies at ETH Zurich.
Right.
And you were actually being helped by this professor to build a program for the board game Othello. And he was a 1Q at the time and brought you to the local club. And that's the point at which you said you were really hooked. So what about the game fascinated you? And was it a smooth transition to switch from programming Othello to programming in Go?
Getting introduced to Go after already knowing Othello, it was really just fascinating, this game. And pretty soon I then started programming it and mostly working on algorithms for capturing stones. And really my tactical skills at the game got a lot stronger than my strategic skills. So at my level, I was a lot stronger tactically thanks to programming it.
Given that you were an Othello player before you became a Go player, do you still play? How does that work? Or did that kind of go away once you started playing Go?
So I'm not playing much now, but when I learned Go, I still continued to play Othello. And relatively speaking, I was weak at Go, and I was quite strong at Othello. And like in 1983, I helped organize the first Othello championship in Switzerland, and I happened to win that one, and then got to go to Paris to the Othello World Championship. And that's something that in Go I could never be strong enough to do that. You might think that Go is sort of a small community, but the competitive Othello community is just a lot smaller even than that. In 1992, I was lucky that the top 2 US players were out of the country. And so I then managed to win the US championship. So 92 was sort of the high point of my Othello career, and then haven't played as much since.
And so that was just sort of the stars aligned. Those 2 top players happened to be out of the country. Did you discover this at the tournament, or did you know this ahead of time?
I think one of them I knew that was going to be out of the country, but not the other one. One of them I have very occasionally won a game against, and the other one I still have not ever had a chance. And he became a world champion later on too. So yeah.
Well, you have to feel pretty good about that, right? If you're not winning against him and he's becoming world champion, you're pretty high up there on the spectrum of ability.
In a very small competitive Othello community. It's
fair enough.
Yeah.
Has Othello gotten more popular since then? Do you have any sense?
I think it's still pretty small. And one drawback of Othello is that you don't really have a handicap system. Like in Go, you get to play against a wide range of opponents, and you can have a really good game. But in Othello, well, if you're weaker, you just get stomped on by a stronger opponent. And there's not much you can do.
Okay, so let's talk now a little bit more about really what you are known for, which is the SmartGo board, the app, the whole system, as well as the SGF file, which stands for SmartGo format, correct?
Right.
So this is pretty much nowadays the universally accepted way that Go players record, store, share their games through different programs and servers. Tell us about how you originally decided to make your own file format.
I just needed a way to store Go games with variations and with a variety of different annotations. So I just used that format for myself, basically. At the time, there was also a .go format that was defined by Ishii Press, the ones who released like the elementary Go series. And it was not a bad format, but it could be improved. And another PhD student in the group I was in, Martin Miller, he and I came up with a list of suggestions for Ishii Press to improve their format so that it could be used better. And yeah, we never heard back on that. And the format pretty much went by the wayside, and Ishii Press also went by the wayside. And then somehow SGF survived.
You've actually described that you created it as a way to save games, and that was really the focus. But then I did see in some of your interviews and talking with other people that you didn't take into account that it might actually become the main way that Go games were sort of saved and passed around. If you could, what are some things that you would change? You mentioned things like the coordinates and the bytes per move.
Yeah, so SGF uses different coordinate system than the standard Go coordinate system. And the reason for that was that back in the late 80s, storage capacities were just ridiculously small, and I needed to store thousands of games. So it seemed important at the time to make the format compact and efficient, and being able to squeeze that into 2 characters instead of 2 and sometimes 3 made a bit of a difference. But clearly that was misguided decision, and yeah, I would make a different decision today. Or if I had thought much more about it, then maybe I would have made a different decision at the time. But yeah, we're stuck. It's what it is.
When we think about SmartGo and this whole system that you've created over years, it started as just really a board in which to record things on the computer, it's turned into so much more. And I think it's fair to say that it's likely the most elegant user interface or among the best user interfaces for Go apps and tools today. So how did SmartGo come to be from first being a semester project where you simply wanted to create an electronic board to then a thesis project to then your PhD dissertation and then your life's work?
So it started as a semester project with just those tactical algorithms. And I was lucky to be able to work on a Lilith, which is kind of an early computer with bitmap graphics and the mouse, so several years before the Macintosh came out. As I worked on this, it became clear that there were some things that this electronic Go board was really good for, like replaying games. But on a real board, you could do so much more, and it was so much more versatile. So then the idea came up, okay, we sort of want to approach what you can do with a real board and have more capabilities there. And so the idea of creating a smart board came up, and that sort of stuck and gave it a name. Yeah, then I continued working on this as my PhD thesis, then generalized the user interface to include Othello, and other people in the group, they added other games. So there was somebody working on chess and somebody working on Nine Men's Morris.
What's Nine Men's Morris?
Nine Men's Morris it's kind of an old game. You have 3 concentric squares and you have 9 tokens that you can place on these locations on those squares and to make 3 in a row. And if you make 3 in a row, you get to take away a token of your opponent. And as soon as you've placed all 9 tokens, then you get to move them along the lines. So the guy who worked on that, Ralph Gasser, so he got his PhD working on that and actually completely solved the game. So he kind of figured out that, Nine Men's Morris is a draw, looking at kind of all positions and working backwards to figure that out. And so he used kind of some of my underlying UI and everything, but then he built his whole thing kind of on top of that. Yeah, so I started doing more kind of with, some tactical algorithms and kind of capturing stones, life and death, things like that, but not a full Go playing program. Then I went to North Carolina for 3 years from 86 to 89. While I was there, we collaborated with Professor Ken Chen from University of Charlotte on a Go playing engine for SmartGo. Then in 89, I went back to Switzerland, and Ken Chen, we sort of split up the development at that point. So Ken Chen worked on his version of the program, and Martin Miller and I, back in Switzerland, kind of worked on our improvements to that program. The funny thing is that the 2 programs then played against each other at the Computer Olympiad in London. Mm-hmm. In the game, Ken Chen's program was just way ahead on the board until late in the game, and then suddenly blundered completely. It was really bad, and then lost the game. So I won that game. And then later, of course, go back and analyze, okay, what happened there? And turns out that the bug that was causing that blunder was in my code. So it's like Ken Chen had sort of inherited that one from me, and
unintentional sabotage.
Unintentional sabotage, exactly. Yeah.
So when you watch that happen at that stage, because I think you said that the level of development at this point was not quite as advanced as AlphaGo and all these things, when you see the blunder, is it very obvious?
No, the blunders were pretty obvious.
Okay.
Yeah. And at that point, I was a bit stronger. I was probably 1 Q or 1 down or something like that. So then the programs were at 15Q, maybe 10Q level, but probably 15Q. Wow. So yeah, it took a long time for programs to get really strong.
Okay, so then at that point, Anders, you left the academic community around 1991 to then go into industry. You only started working on SmartGo again around 1997 because you were working at Microsoft on PowerPoint. So is it fair to say that there was some sort of like a jumping off point to then go full time working on SmartGo?
There were a number of things that came together at that time. So SmartGo was written in Model 2, and I was working with C++ at Microsoft. And so I think around 95 or so, I started just as a hobby to rewrite some of the base code of SmartGo in C++. And I followed along on progress of computer programs in the 90s, but figured that they'll make progress faster. So I'll just focus on UI and that kind of code, not the Go playing code. And then I think it was 97, I went to a computer Go tournament in San Francisco just to watch. And the programs were still just playing so poorly that I figured, okay, I can write a program that plays equally poorly. So, so I started kind of thinking more along those lines. And I was in Silicon Valley at the time, and Martin Miller, he was doing a postdoc in Berkeley, and so we collaborated on some of that base C++ code for SmartGo. Then in 98, I had a 3-month sabbatical from Microsoft, and I used that to work on a Go playing program. And I figured out that I like working on that, and I like working for myself, and so on. And then in 98, we had twins. And so pretty soon it became clear that, I was just stretched too thin with the kids and with Microsoft. There was just no time for any more computer Go work. So I was lucky at the time that, I could leave Microsoft and start SmartGo full time, and having some stock options definitely helped with that transition.
You've discussed in previous interviews about the advent of the iPad. So you said after that came out, it really became an ideal interface for Go and for Go players. Tell us why.
Having SmartGo on the iPhone was great, but the screen was always so small and was hard to enter the moves, and you couldn't see a lot of the functions. You had to hide everything away. When the iPad came out, it felt like, okay, you could really hold this Go board in your hand, and it was big enough to just tap on the screen to enter a move. And it sort of opened up a lot of possibilities there. Yeah, so I kind of experimented with that, then figured out, okay, instead of just having the board, I can also, like if I want to show variation, I can show that as a diagram, like in a book. From that then came the Go Books project that just, why not really show it just like a book, and then be able to replay the moves in the diagrams directly there. And yeah, that worked out over time.
I don't know how many people you come across that do this, but I almost exclusively play Go when I'm playing online. I only use my iPad or a tablet. When you think about SmartGo for the iPad, are there any new possibilities that you might see could be done for using the app on iPad?
Well, so the new pencil can now detect when you're hovering over it. So it's not something that I have worked with yet, but it's kind of something I want to experiment with. And that might be an option to get that on the iPad. One improvement that I made recently in SmartGo that kind of really helps with replaying games is that you can just swipe below the board. So you don't need to tap to go next move. You can just swipe back and forth and replay. That makes it a lot easier, I think, which is not as good on a computer, but works better on iPad or iPhone.
I have to say, I've been using the online Go server demo board because now they've integrated AI onto it and these sorts of things. Should I be using SmartGo instead?
I would say absolutely, yes. I've been using SmartGo a lot to record games while I'm playing in tournaments and so on. And a lot of the functions in SmartGo are kind of optimized for me to do that. One function is if you miss entering a pair of moves, which can happen,
Yes.
you don't want to have to erase all the moves to go back to that point. And in SmartGo, you can just go back to that point, insert those moves, and then go back to the end. That you have the complete game record. Another thing I've added in SmartGo 1 is that you have tournament mode. And so that one disables all the smarts and AI functions. It also highlights it in a way so that the tournament director can see that you are just recording your game. You are not trying to cheat here and use AI. So definitely you should be using SmartGo to record.
Okay, so you did this and the iPad came along, and then you also said, oh, wow, I can also do some other things. I can really innovate. So you have actually taken in Go Book the standstill diagrams. And these are diagrams that are in famous books from many years ago that they're only showing the sequentially numbered steps you would have to play. And I find it really hard to follow. And you actually made them interactive. And then you digitize them and make them available on your platform, which I think has just been a game changer. It's been really nice to have. Had this been something you identified as a way to improve to study and the learning experience for Go enthusiasts for a long time? Or did that come to you kind of overnight or quickly once the iPad came out?
Once the iPad came out and they sort of experiment with things, then pretty soon I figured out that I wanted to have more of like a book view of annotated games. Then basically the impetus for Go Books is that I wanted the book Invincible. I wanted to be able to have that in my pocket. But I had to gain the trust of Richard Bosselage first. So I had to do some other books before he kind of gave me that one to digitize.
Can you give us a little context? What's the book Invincible and who is Richard?
So Richard Bosselage, he is basically Kiseido Publishing. So he's been writing a lot of Go books and publishing Go books for the last 30 years. And this book, Invincible, is by John Power about the games of Shusaku. And it's just an amazing work. Speaking of John Power, he has released another book very recently, Essential Go Proverbs. You might think, okay, Essential Go Proverbs, there are some proverbs in there. No, it's like all of them are in there. And it's a really thick book. And then for every proverb, there's the explanations and then a bunch of examples and then counter examples of when this proverb does not apply and examples from professional games. It's just an amazing book that has been like 40 years in the making. He has been collecting this material and everything, and he finally came out with it. So, yeah, really, really happy to have that one in the Go Books collection.
That's a huge win. Digitizing the books, making those interactive diagrams, what's that process like? I know you originally had something like 8 books in the beginning and something like 150 books, which is incredible. Tell us about that process.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. In the beginning, I used SGF, of course, that's what I would use to encode the books. So I added some special annotations in the comments, and then the app would sort of translate that into, okay, make a diagram here and show moves 20 to 25 and so on. But it was really hard to work with that because there was basically a mismatch between SGF with like a tree of moves. It has this tree structure, and a book is pretty much a linear thing. It's kind of text, diagram. So what I did was create a whole new file format for just the books. And so it's the Go book format, and that's now used for all 160 books. The conversion process. So for many of the books, I have my friend John Mifsud do the conversion from a printed book to the Go book format. And for some books, we might have electronic text or diagrams. But for many books, it's like you start completely from scratch. You only have the printed book. So he is going through that process, and I'm paying him for his time, and it's about 500 to 1,000 for a typical book. So there's an upfront cost on getting the books digitized. And then when people go in the app and buy the book, then, well, Apple takes a cut. So then I take a cut, and the publishers get kind of a slightly larger cut. For some books, they make back their investment in a year or two or something. And for others, it takes many years. And some just stay in the red forever. It's hard to predict kind of which ones are going to really work out and which ones are not.
I wish I could see data that showed whether people used or read these books more because they're available in the Go book format through SmartGo, as opposed to just not being able to find a copy in print or whatever it might be. I'm sure that data could be put together, but I would imagine it would say that you've actually provided access to these books to people that may not have come across it. I know that for me, that was certainly the case.
I hope so. And for some books, it's very clear that the books are out of print or something. So
Right,
there is not really a way to get them anymore. And some books are not available anywhere else. They're only in Go books. And then there's like Richard Hunter, who had some books in print format, like his book on the monkey jump he had with Slate and Shell. But he then put that into Go books, and then he greatly expanded it. So the version that's in Go books is not something you can find anywhere else or in print format. So
that's really cool when it becomes something new and improved and different than what it originally was. What's that whole back and forth with the publishers? I mean, is it literally just you reaching out to the contacts you have at the publishers and saying, hey, can I purchase the digital rights to the book? And then some say yes, some say no.
Pretty much, yeah. So I kind of have a standard agreement with them that we both sign, and that says what we both kind of have to do for this and how it works out financially and everything. And there are some books that I would love to include in Go books. Like best example is probably Kageyama's Lessons in the Fundamentals of Go, which is just a great book. And there are some rights issues that keep Casado from being able to give me the digital rights for that. And so I won't be able to do that.
Is that something like them just saying, oh, sorry, Anders, there's a clause in the contract with Casado and this book that just precludes us from doing that with you, sorry? Or is it to do with the original author of the book? I mean, it's just complicated.
Exactly. It's complicated. On different books, it's different complications. Then you have the complication with publishers that go out of business. Like Go Game Guru completely disappeared, and there was no way to pay them any more money. So I had to remove those books from the Go Books app.
When you made this new Go book file format, how was it different from the SGF file format?
So basically, it uses the standard Go coordinates. So I didn't make that same mistake again. But basically, it has some piece of Go data like a Go game or a Go position or something. So you specify that, which moves there are or which stones are on the board. And then you specify, okay, I want a figure here for moves 33 to 40. And then I want some text. And then I want a diagram starting at move 36, kind of based on that game, with the following moves. And so you just specify these things in a linear way. And so you can, it's a pure text format, so you can just edit it directly that way. In SmartGo 1, you can take annotated games and you can convert them to Go book format. But right now you can't do enough with it. You can't edit that as well kind of within SmartGo 1. So there's a lot I can do in the future in that direction.
That actually kind of leads into the next question I had, which was, you've built out all these things, right? Pro game library, Joseki matching, Go problems, the ability to play versus AI now, recording, editing, storing those games. Any new capabilities that are in the works just in the nearish term that listeners might want to know?
I recently worked on improving Catago integration into SmartGo, and it made it a lot faster. And for most users, it's working great, but I'm still working through some problems. I'm tracking down. There are a few people where it's not working as it should be. So that's sort of something I'm working on. But the capability of kind of improving Catago, it's already led to improved hints. Like you can turn hints on and keep them on as you're replaying a game or as you're playing a game. So one thing I want to do pretty soon is then improve the full game analysis. You can already have Catago analyze your whole game and give you a score graph of where it goes up and down. But yeah, I can do more with that, make it more useful. Like in the area of books, there are a lot of things I want to do in the UI, that and everything. But one problem I have there is that I need to completely change the underlying code for how the book is laid out. Apple changed kind of from TextKit 1 to TextKit 2. And problem is it's not really an easy change because they took out some features, like breaking it up into pages is one thing that they took out. So it has a lot of good new features, but I also need to kind of spend a lot of time getting that in there. So it's just kind of unpredictable when I get to what. And I try to always fix high priority bugs if there are any, but then add more features or refine the existing features, and then sometimes add some big things. But some years there's not much to do to keep up with Apple, but then other years, yeah, they give us a lot of homework to keep up with the platform and everything.
When you think about having all this work done with Go specifically in computing and computer Go, and then you witness the advent of AI systems from AlphaGo in 2016 to ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity. I mean, now you can see, even on normal Microsoft computers or PCs, you're seeing AI systems just on the search bar. What observations and takeaways do you have? Did Go serve as a critical stepping stone to get AI to where it is today?
Yeah, I think AlphaGo was definitely like a stepping stone, and taught Google a lot about how to approach this. AlphaGo has also shown us some of the pitfalls. Like it took many years to figure out that these AI Go programs that we thought were unbeatable, that they were actually beatable with very kind of a simple strategy. You create a dead group with a big I and let the computer surround it, and then you surround that group and slowly squeeze it, and the computer doesn't realize what's going on until it's too late. And it's a situation that computer hasn't really trained on. And so that's something that's happening in Go, and we see it in other places, like with the large language models, ChatGPT. And so they're trained on just text, but not really the real world or something. So you get, yeah, it can be fooled, and it's amazing what they can do. But I think kind of seeing in Go that it can be so completely subverted is really kind of a wake-up call.
Let's turn over to your personal world with Go and a couple lightning round questions. So you're a Don level Go player. Do you still get time to play in tournaments and things like that, or online?
So I don't really have time to play online. There's just too much to do on SmartGo.
Sure.
But I like playing games with long time limits. So the games at the Go Congress are sort of my favorite. It's usually an hour and a half per player. I still get into Byoyomi in those games, but I feel like I can at least think about my mistakes.
Sure.
So I've been lucky to go to the European Go Congress a few times, and there you have 2 weeks of Go playing. Yeah.
You're somebody that's dedicated a lot of your personal and professional life to Go in different ways. How do you think about the ability for Go to become more popular in the West?
It's a hard game, and so I think it will naturally just appeal to a smaller segment of the population. But still, it should be more popular than it is now. And with SmartGo, I'm doing what I can. It's a free download, and hopefully it will get some people into it. But I think there's much more I can do to make it more appealing to beginner players when they first kind of start in the app. And so over time, I hope to work on more of that. But fundamentally, it's just a hard problem because there are so many other things that compete for people's time. Getting them to invest a bunch of time into learning Go, and you sort of have to really stick with it for a while until you get good enough to really get hooked. And then you're a Go player, and then you just spend time doing it. But to get to that is hard.
Since 2016 with AlphaGo, through SmartGo and seeing how many people are downloading it, have you been able to track any trends? Do you see any blips on the radar when something happens in the Go world?
So when AlphaGo happened, there was definitely a blip, kind of a pretty large bump. Sales went to about 3 times what they were normally. But then after a few months, it kind of went back down to the normal level. And then I think when the AlphaGo documentary came out, there was another blip at that point. So there's definitely some things that trigger an interest in it, but
Sure.
It doesn't lead to a lasting kind of increase.
Are your kids Go players, and can they beat their old man at Go?
No, not yet. So we have 3 kids, and only one of them plays Go. Well, he's close to my strength, but maybe not quite.
You still give him a few stones.
Maybe 2 stones or something. Did once.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So he's getting there. How old is he?
Yeah. He's 26 now.
He's got time on his side.
Right, but he's not actively playing quite enough. So
my last question for you: will there be a special space or a shrine for playing Go in this new passive house in Kanab?
I had not planned on one, but now I need to rearrange everything and make sure that there's a shrine. Yeah. Yeah.
That sounds good. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Travis.
Now I'm back to a conversation with BenKyo where we're talking about arch rivals. How do you think about a rival? How do you even think about improving against others that have been improving themselves? What's your point of reference? So let's jump to that conversation now. You can play a physical, in real life game of Go over an amazing board, whatever that type of board is for you. What kind of physical setting would you want to play it in, and who are you playing against?
Well, I always imagined sort of a Yugen no Ma, like the Room of Deep Contemplation, which they show in Hikaru no Go, and of course exists in the Nihon Kin for the title matches and whatnot. So I think a lot of people imagined that kind of room, right? The title matches, yeah. So
cool.
You've got these 2 low seats that they're in with the armrest thing, and the thick board, and some tea, and like nice kind of atmosphere around the room. So you can really concentrate, right? And then the other person would be like your arch nemesis, your rival, right? That's what would be more interesting to me. Obviously, it'd be very cool to play someone way stronger, play a top pro or something. But yeah, nothing is more climactic, I guess, than a super long, concentrated match against a rival, right? We were talking about this recently with some friends, like at these events I was at recently, like Canadian Open. We're talking about the power of having a rival, which I don't know if I exactly have one right now.
Do you have one? Yeah, that's a
I have
question.
like numerous rivals, I would say.
Are they other prominent Go streamers or content providers, and then they happen to be at your level, or is it more specific than that?
I think some of the players in the Canadian Go scene who are around my level or slightly stronger around there, feel like rivals. And I think, yeah, a lot of the streamers close to my level are starting to feel like rivals too. I've been thinking about this after that conversation a few days ago, because maybe it can help my own motivation even more if I think about this whole rival kind of thing, like trying to pass by or catch up to like a certain person. Because when I started Go, I was like that. I was pretty competitive inside my own mind, because I started playing and then I discovered a few of my friends in high school knew how to play. So there's like an 18Q, then there's a 10Q, then there's there's actually one guy who was like 2Q, as well as a lot of people at the Toronto Go Club back when I started. And it feels really cool to just have all these milestones. In my experience, it was more effective when those milestones were people instead of just a number.
It certainly makes sense, right? That's like a natural human drive. But then just to that point, this concept of having a rival is interesting, right? Because it's got to be somebody that you have sort of seen along the way, be kind of near your level or approaching you or whatever it is, or you're approaching them. But then also it's like you respect them, or hopefully you respect them or come to respect them over time as an opponent. And you might even be their friend. But then the other side is like when you guys sit down for that game, you are like fiercely competitive.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think if anyone who doesn't exactly have a rival, you can maybe imagine someone in a tournament that you really want to beat next time. That's fine, right? Come to think of it, I don't know if I ever really had like a rival per se, but now that I think about it again, what really worked for me actually was kind of like the hurdles. So naturally, there's going to be a lot of people who are not always improving or improving as fast as you. And so they're not moving targets, right? And that's nice to have some moving targets and some not moving targets. Because when you have someone who's, let's say, like 1 dan or 5Q or whatever, and they're not necessarily improving or like training or whatever, then once you pass them and start winning against them, you know for sure that you improved, as opposed to the moving target that you never beat, but it doesn't mean you're not improving, but you can't really tell.
There's so much going on there of points of reference. I don't even know how to get my brain around that, but it can feel, I can see how it could feel good to see somebody that's like, oh, they were much better than me before. Now I've surpassed them.
It's like in my BenKyo league. So a lot of people are improving all at the same time. And then people that that are pretty sure they're improving because they're improving like on KGS or OGS, whatever, they're not necessarily catching up to or passing that many people around them in, let's say, their BKL group. And so how do you tell if you're really improving? Well, yeah, it's passing maybe the not moving targets, if there are any, right?
Well, that's a really good point, because you could then get caught into a false sense of like, well, maybe I'm not improving because everybody else is still like just as good as me, or I'm not getting higher up in my group in the BenKyo league. But then maybe they go and play like OGS and they're like, whoa, I'm playing way better. I don't know. But
that's exactly what it was like for me in Korea back in 2009 when I trained there for 5 months. Everyone was improving a lot, and we were ordered on the league chart based on our wins and losses each week, right? It felt like you weren't improving because you weren't always getting more wins against so-and-so after like a month or something. But then indeed, like I came back and I was 2 to 3 stones stronger. So
yeah, it's also if you happen to be the weaker person in a group of very strong players and you get pummeled for days, weeks, or months, you then come out of it and you're way stronger, right? I mean,
anime
you
style.
Gotta anime style. Next up, Go organizer Devin Fraze and I get into some more in-depth conversations about what type of system you use for running a tournament and the different pros and cons that come from that. Talking about the tournaments, how much does format come into play in terms of whether it's a single elimination, round robin, best of 3, best of 5 match, or even the time format used? Like, what factors must be weighed when you're making these decisions?
All of them, definitely.
Okay.
So
I've noticed that players will generally, if it sounds like you're going to be running a good tournament and that overall you have a lot of things checked, will come no matter what format you run. So that's good to know as an organizer. But that being said, the enjoyment level of the players afterward, and maybe if they'll come back, will be decided upon how that format went and what you did. One of the things I've done is I've split the formats between the main division, which is most players, say below 4 Dan, and the higher level, I sometimes call it Masters Division or High Dan Division, whatever you want to call it, of the strongest players. One of the things the strongest players want is they want clarity about who won. They don't want to be, left wondering where they have sort of round robin tournament and you have a 3-way tie. That sucks. Or you're using McMahon and somebody wins by, 1 SOSOS point. And they're like, what even is that? Like,
I don't know the McMahon system and I don't know what SOSOS is. So
yeah. And this is something that I really need to make a video on because a lot of people are confused on it, even though they use it for tournaments and we're playing tournaments, so they use it. And in some ways, it has a lot of benefits, but there's a lot of really careful considerations you need to make if you're running a McMahon system. So the idea for McMahon, just to give a quick overview, is you're assigned points at the beginning based on your rank or group that you're in. And then if you win a game, you get an extra point. If you lose a game, it stays the same. At the end, whoever has the higher number of McMahon points wins. But of course, what happens if you have a tied number of McMahon points? Well, what you want to do is you want to look at the sum of your opponent's score. So if we add up all the points that of the people we played in the tournament, what is that number? Typically, if you have a McMahon score of like 30, and then you add up all your opponents, it's like 30 times 6 or something ish. You're going to get some number like 140 or something. So maybe I'm just making it up. So, and then the question is, does your sum of scores, SOS, is that higher than the person that you tied with for McMahon? Okay, no, it's not. Oh no, darn. What do we do now? You have the same sum of scores.
Geez.
Typically that does work, but sometimes it doesn't. So now you look at the sum of scores. So you just do it again, kind of recursively, just one more level at least. And typically that will, unless something went horribly wrong with the software, that will solve it. And so you can have, a situation where it's like just eking out the closest margin. Strong players who understand this will typically accept it, but it doesn't feel good, I don't think. So
sure.
What I've started doing for the strong players is not round robin, of course, not McMahon. I like to do a kind of like bracket system. And so I've experimented with a couple different kinds. And the beauty of a bracket system is simply that if you win all your games, you're the winner. And you have to be careful, of course, you don't want to have 6 rounds and then you have 8 players in the bracket. And if you know anything about brackets, that's not enough, right? You essentially want to do 2 to the power of R number of rounds because for number of players and per round. If you have 1 round, you need 2 players. If you have 4 players and you have 1 round, you can't have a clear winner. If you have 4 players, you need 2 rounds. Oh, good. So we have 2 rounds, 4 players, you'll find a clear winner. One of the problems with this kind of single elimination thing, though, is you're going to run into an issue where you don't have a clear second and third place. The second place typically was given to the person that played the winner in the last round and lost. Sorry, you want to have a clear third and fourth place. So it depends on how many prizes you want to give out and stuff like that. We'll tell you if you need a single elimination or double elimination bracket. Double elimination brackets, if you do that, take more rounds than a single. And then what I've done and what I like is doing, if I have enough rounds, double elimination knockout, quote unquote. So if you do lose 2 games, you join the main section and you start playing with everybody else, or you kind of enter this pool of players within the hide-on section and you kind of like play whoever's left. And there's usually enough players to make that work if you do your job advertising well and you get a high enough number. So, I mean, there are some constrictions on, again, number of rounds and number of players. You want to be careful about that. But that kind of balancing can lead to a really exciting kind of Masters division, top division. And I've even seen players in the lower divisions watching excitedly. Like, oh, who's winning so far?
Yeah.
I can't wait to see. Because then it's more clear for them. You can do nice visuals. You can create physical charts. I actually, one time for tournament, I used poster board and I like literally drew out the brackets and we wrote your name if you won on the new spot. And so people were able to visually follow and would walk up and look at that. Those kind of things can really make it enriching for the high divisions. And I do recommend that. For everyone else, I usually use either McMahon, which works very well for large crowds of people or even small, or I use this continual pairing style that I've learned from first Mark Rubenstein in Chicago. Apparently the San Francisco Go Club invented it maybe like 40 years ago or something. What is continuous pairing? So continuous pairing, also I've termed it arena style of play, is this idea of you enter the battle arena and you play whoever's available. You just start fighting. You fight everyone you see. And it's this very fun style of play where if you are up for it, you can have 8 games a day, 10 games in a day. 10's a lot, but I've seen people do it. Or if you're chill, you're maybe a little older, you don't want to stretch your brain, or you're just like not feeling it, you can play 2 games and you can just be done. And it doesn't hurt anyone else. Because one of the things that happens in a normal tournament that can be off-putting is you have these rounds, you have to play 4 rounds. If you want to take a bye, but maybe you forget to tell me, you wander off and then I've paired you because, you're playing. It's a problem, Versus continual pairing, it also solves the issue of like kids who play really fast. So kids will play this fast game and then they'll like just be piddling around for like an hour and a half, and so that's not great. Or you're an adult and you usually play slow, but you've messed up a Joseki and in the first 30 moves, you've clearly lost. And so you resign. Well, crap, now you're just waiting. So continual pairing allows you to, when you're done, come up to the TD and I'll find you a new partner. Now, one thing I've done differently, and we actually did it for the Die Hard this year, and I think it worked better. I got good feedback because we did do this continual pairing, is we actually have changed it to continual pairing, but at certain, markers of time. So maybe every half hour. So I pair every half hour on the hour and on the half hour. So if you finish and it's 12:05, well, you're going to wait 25 minutes, but that's, only 25 minutes. And you can know confidently when you should be ready for the next game. One of the things that happens with just pure continuous pairing that isn't so fun is people will wait around for a game. And I think mathematically, at least, it's kind of very clear that it overall reduces the amount of time people have to wait per game, which is very beautiful. But any individual might have to wait super long, while some people wait like 10 seconds. So if you do this kind of like pooling of people, so they kind of like, you wait for kind of a certain number of people to become available by the half hour or something, then you can kind of pair them from that, and they know exactly when to be there. They feel confident on how much break time they can get. I mean, already you can stop playing any time you want and go get a break and go get lunch or something, but they kind of know when they would want to be back so that they can be paired against interesting opponents. One more flaw that could happen with continual pairing, and has happened, is the only 2 people available are like a 20 queue and a 5 queue. It's like, okay, we don't want to pair them together, so they both just have to wait around. Versus if you let pooling happen, it's more likely people around your rank are going to be available at that same time. So anyway, that's the newest thing. I've been developing it over years, again, based off ideas from, yonder olden times. But I do think it's a very exciting type of play. The last thing I'll say about it is, when I mentioned earlier about who the customer is, like what is, I'm serving the players as the organizer. My goal for them is to have the most fun possible. If you're weaker than, 2 Dan or 4 Dan or whatever, you're not there to just like, grind out the wins against the best and become the champion or something. You're there to have interesting games and have a good time. You want it to be serious games. You want to have a clock and you want to, have a nice playing space and have it be relatively quiet. But you're not seeking greatness, per se. So doing this kind of like version that allows you to take care of yourself more, play more authentically, and then also potentially get more games in if you're hungry for that, or less if you want, I think is serving the players very well. So that's my recommendation. I got a plug, of course. The only software that can do this is the software I developed. I developed it over a long period of time. Based on all these learnings, because it doesn't exist. I mean, no one was doing it before. Mark Rubenstein had created one that worked locally only on his computer. But now if you visit app.baduk.club, it's a program called Tenjin. It's free to use. You can sign up there. It does everything from registration to you can just upload a CSV if you did your own registrants or add players manually, to the pairing, the types of pairings. It does McMahon as well, and Swiss as well. And then it helps you decide the winner, figure that out. And it even helps you submit to, say, the AGA afterward. One click goes directly to the AGA. Typically helps tournament games be rated next day, which is super powerful. Almost every tournament that's used my software gets it rated next day, and players love that.
As we wrap up this episode, the question I want to leave you with is, what other technology do you think would be helpful to the world of Go, or do you see coming down the pike that could be helpful, whether it's in learning the game, studying the game, or in reviewing your games? Let me know, and I'll catch you next time.